It's the Brad Field Weather Podcast, underwritten by Action Carpet and Floor Covering of Simsbury, a family-run business that's built for you, and by McAllen Construction. McAllen Construction, from the first dig to the last nail. I am Dan Lavallo. He is meteorologist Brad Field, as we put together another podcast on this Friday, December the 5th. And Brad, earlier this week, we did have a weather event, really the first one of the winter. And I know you've compiled some information. What did you come up with?
Dan, can there be any doubt that we are in winter? I mean, it was 5 this morning at Bradley, and some of the folks up your way, it was down near 0. And compliments of a snowpack. That helped a lot. And up your way, Dan, I have a report of the Tuesday storm of 5 inches of snow in Winstead. I believe the report I got from the Torrington Observer was 3 inches. Do you concur?
I would concur. We had 3 inches at our house, yes.
Yeah. We had about 1.5 inches, 2 inches here in East Windsor, but it was very heavy snow. That very heavy, wet snow. It wasn't 1.5 inches of fluff. You know, when you get through shoveling it, you knew that you had been out doing some work. It contained a lot of water content. But other reports I have, Dan, of the storm on Tuesday, we have reports from Granby of 4 inches. Same deal in West Simsbury and New Hartford. 4 inches of accumulation. The Bristol and the aforementioned Torrington coming in with 3 inches of accumulation. The official total at Bradley International Airport, this is where we will be making the measurements for the winter, because we have to pick some spot to take the official measurements. 2.4 inches at Bradley, Dan. And around 2.5 also out just to the north of Danbury, up through New Milford and Brookfield, for example. Summers, up toward the northeast, had 2 inches of accumulation. Vernon had about 1.5 inches, and the accumulating snow went down to some of the hilly terrain south and east of Hartford. For example, Bolton, Dan, had a solid inch of snow on the ground. So that was the recap of the storm on Tuesday. Most of the rest of the state just had a cold rain that occasionally mixed with a little bit of freezing rain, a couple of ice pellets, a couple of wet snowflakes. But to get the accumulating snow, you had to go to about Interstate 84 for the most part. There were exceptions, as I said, down toward Bolton. But Interstate 84 and points north and west of there had a decent accumulating first snow of the year.
You know, Brad, it's interesting because you mentioned it was a heavy snow. And as I recall, last year, many of our storms had that heavy kind of snow rather than the white, fluffy snow. Do you anticipate that's what we are going to get for most of this winter, this type of a storm, or is just one of those things?
No, Dan, I don't. And I'm putting the finishing touches on the winter forecast. And we will have that on our podcast next week. But as I put the finishing touches on the forecast for the winter, I am noticing the potential of very, very cold weather. And you'll see that in a second. I've got the climate. Now, I'm not saying that the first 4 days of December are the be-all, tell-all for the winter, but it's pretty impressive. So the short answer to your question about the consistency of the snow would be no. I do think it'll be fluffy snow a lot of the time. And if that does indeed occur, the snow totals will be greater than they've been in a lot of winters past, because, the official way to measure a snowstorm, Dan, and, most people will think, well, it doesn't take a Rhodes Scholar to figure this one out. You go out with a ruler and put it in and see how much is on the ground. But that's not really the way they do it. And downwind of the Great Lakes, when they have these blockbuster blizzards, the proper way to measure snow is they use what they call a snowboard, and they let the snow accrue on the snowboard for 6 hours. Then they go out and measure it. Then they clear the board and let it go 6 more hours, measure it, and add it to the first number. Clear the board, go out again. And however many times they have to do that before the snow ends. The reason being, Dan, snow has weight. And the weight of the snow on top of the snow on the bottom smushes it down. It makes sense, right?
Yep.
If you've got 3 inches of snow on the ground and then you put 5 inches of snow on top of that, it's going to smush the 3 inches on the ground down more, compact it. And so the way to get around that is by using that snowboard method and measuring for 6 hours and then clearing the board. Now, that's arbitrary, the 6 hours. I mean, it could be 1 hour, clear the board, 1 hour, clear the board. But, in an effort to not be a slave to doing that, they kind of the consistency is that they use the 6 hour window. So that's what they do. So the fluffy snow, I do think there'll be a lot of fluffy snow this year because the column of air over us is going to be cold a lot of the time. Now, when the column of air is critical, or in other words, around 32 Fahrenheit, even if it's cold at the ground or even if it's warm at the ground, if a snowflake comes through a warmer layer, it will tend to start to melt a little bit and become the more wet type of snow that comes down. But if the column is cold all the way through the column, and what I mean by the column is you go vertically straight up through the atmosphere. If it's substantially below freezing at all levels, you will have the fluffy, powdery snow. That's called a temperature sounding. Uh, back in when I first started my career, they would launch these, they call them radiosonde balloons that would go up to certain levels of the atmosphere, like 1 mile up and take the temperature and the wind and the humidity profile, and then, 10,000 feet up and do the same thing. And they would call those the significant levels of the atmosphere. So you could see if you just think of what's going on at the ground, north, south, east, west, it might be 24 degrees and pouring rain. And as a meteorologist, you would think, wait a second, I got the storm right. I got the cold temperatures right. Why the heck is it raining?
Right.
Well, there are these sneaky levels in the atmosphere that will come in. Like all of a sudden, like 1 mile up, there might be warm air riding. And why does that happen? Cold air is molecularly more dense. So the cold air tends to trap in near the ground. And because the warm air is less dense, when the warm air is coming in, it rides up and over the cold air. So when the warm air is riding up and over the cold air, if the layer is thick enough, you can get a snowflake to come all the way to the ground. If the layer is a little bit thinner, the snowflake might melt into a raindrop. And then as it comes through cold air near the ground, if it has time to freeze, it will become an ice pellet. If it doesn't have time to freeze, it will become just be a super cooled raindrop that'll hit a cold ground environment and freeze into ice. And that's the worst case scenario for pedestrians and vehicles, of course, would be having an ice storm. So those are the kind of things we look at uh, when we're talking not only north, south, east, west, we're talking north, south, east, west, up and down through the atmosphere. So, but this winter, it looks to me as though we've got a shot at it being colder than average, and that would yield fluffier snow. because of the fact that all layers of the atmosphere, I'm not saying every single storm, but on a good percentage of them. So that all comes back to the climatology.
Right, which is our next segment, talking about the climate report. We're four days into December. This is being put together on the 5th of December. The meteorological winter started on December 1st. What do you have in the way of our climatology report?
Well, Dan, on December 5th, the normal high temperature at Bradley is 44, and the normal low temperature at Bradley is 27. That is, you take 100 years and plus of weather records and you average them and you come up with those readings. 44, the average high temperature on December 5th, 27, the average low temperature on December 5th. Well, on December 5th, 2025, it was 5 at Bradley. Dan, that is a whopping 22 degrees below average today. Now, the high, I'm projecting 26. That is 18 degrees below average. Today is going to go into the record book as about 20 degrees below normal. So, I mean, we are looking at some serious cold. December 1st averaged 5 degrees below normal for the day. The 2nd, when it was snowing in parts of the state, 9 below normal for the day. The 3rd, 6 below normal for the day. Yesterday, 9 below normal for the day. Today is going to average around 20 degrees below normal for the day. So we're going to start seeing a lot of weird stuff happening. Ponds that you usually don't see freezing until January sometime are going to start to ice over, or they already have. And I was driving by and I saw in Granby, I saw a pond, and I said I wouldn't go out and stand on it right now, but it was frozen across. So it's just unusual that we're starting so early, and all of the signals. And I don't want. I'm bad at keeping secrets. My wife says I'm the worst person in the world for keeping a secret. So I've got in my mind what I want to tell you for the winter forecast, but I'm not ready to do it yet. But everything I'm seeing in terms of signals, Dan, right now I would tell you I would bet my house that the month of December is going to come in colder than average. I'm not saying I would bet $10. I would bet my house that, I mean, it is going to be a cold month.
Now, that said, without spilling any secrets, I've been reading that a Greenland block is responsible for our polar plunge. Is that correct?
Yes, in part. And another, there are several parts to the equation. There's something that has been studied over the last couple of decades called sudden stratospheric warming events, where all of a sudden over the North Pole, high up, we're talking the column of air over, not where Santa lives, straight up, going a mile or two above the North Pole. All of a sudden, the temperature will start warming dramatically. And by dramatically, I mean maybe sometimes as much as 50 degrees Fahrenheit. And the ramifications that has on, remember we talk about like El Nino and La Nina, and the water temperature in the tropical Pacific and how that'll affect the downstream weather. These things all come into play, trying to figure out what the ridge trough pattern around the globe is going to be as you go into a winter season. And that, you got to take into effect, and I am no expert on it. Hard stop right there on the sudden stratospheric warming events. I refer to people that have studied this a great meteorologist named Judah Cohen, for example, Ryan Maui. I defer to guys like that who make it their studies. Like when I was doing television, um, there was a man I had great respect for that was the director of the National Hurricane Center. His name was Max Mayfield. I would defer to Max and his people for the forecast on hurricanes. Whereas I think if he were coming to Connecticut, he might defer to Brad Field for how much snow and ice we're going to get. So it's those different levels of respect of someone who works in the field. I used to work at a place called Weather Services Corporation in the late 1970s up till around 1980, and they had a long-term climatology department that they called commodities, that they would forecast for the orange crop in Florida. They would forecast for the cocoa crop in Brazil. These worldwide things, and you think about it, you know, cocoa is bought by Hershey to make chocolate bars. And I mean, these, and obviously the oranges are self-defining, like why you would be concerned about the orange crop in Florida. Well, what happens if you have a horrible freeze in Florida and the orange crop is destroyed? What's going to happen to the price of orange juice? All these things are intertwined. But my point is, I am no expert on the orange groves outside of Ocala, Florida, and I don't pretend to be. So I defer to people who make it their livelihood, who I respect, to look into such things. We told you too that when La Nina is weakening and moving toward neutrality, or El Nino is weakening and moving the opposite way toward neutrality, when you end up with ENSO neutral in the Pacific, I've said it a million times on this podcast, cause and effect. And in this case, effect and cause. When we have the effect of neutrality in the ENSO tropical Pacific, we usually end up with a lot of snow. We are in a weakening La Nina right now, Dan. So we are in a polar vortex stretching mode as the sudden stratospheric warming occurs. We are also seeing in the tropical Pacific going toward neutrality from La Nina, going toward ENSO neutral, Greenland blocking. You put it all together and you say, the odds are darn good. I'm not saying it's a slam dunk, but the odds are darn good. This is going to be a darn good winter.
Well, you put it all together, and in the words of the late sportscaster Keith Jackson, Whoa, Nelly.
I used to what's the song? Oh, the show Meet the Parents. I had not heard that term since I was a little kid. And in the Meet the Parents, they're at the stoplight, and Ben Stiller pulls up, and the cars are next to each other, and he goes peeling out, and the mom in the back goes, "Whoa, Nelly!" And it reminded me of my childhood when I heard that expression.
It is the Bradfield Weather Podcast, underwritten by Action Carpet and Floor Covering of Simsbury and McAllen Construction. Brad, let's get to our On the Weather Map segment. What do things look like as we put this together again on the 5th of December?
Well, Dan, it is a beautiful day, but I mean, we just started meteorological winter. We haven't even gotten to astronomical winter yet, which is still more than 2 weeks hence. But it is a midwinter type day out there today. From a morning low of 35 to an afternoon high of around 25. That's it. We've got high pressure off Boston as we head through the midday today, Dan. And we've got a low pressure area near Wilmington, North Carolina. Now, if you happen to be watching the news today on, Fox or on CNN or on MS Now, whatever your favorite national cable news network is, you might see some correspondents in Washington with some snowflakes coming down on them. That storm, though, is out to sea. We are not going to really get that. Now, there's a little caveat there that the northern fringe of moisture from that storm at Wilmington, North Carolina, heading east-northeast out to sea, enough moisture may come north that very late tonight, Friday night going into Saturday morning, December 6th. So we're talking 4 in the morning, 5 in the morning, 6 in the morning. There could be some patchy snow breaking out across Connecticut to the tune of localized coatings, maybe a half an inch somewhere. That's the patchy, extreme northern fringe of that out to sea storm. So that is in the picture a little bit for Saturday morning. Now, by this evening, again, I'm talking about that snow shield, the DC area pushing north, sort of hugging along the southern New England coastline, the coatings to half an inch. By tomorrow afternoon, though, that's all gone, and it's just kind of mostly cloudy. We're sort of in no man's land between that departing low, and we'll have another cold front advancing from the Great Lakes. It'll be in western New York by, say, 7 p.m. Saturday evening. So, sort of a mostly cloudy day tomorrow with temperatures in the 30s after we get through that little patchy morning snow. By 7 a.m. Sunday, that cold front will be moving into Connecticut. Cannot rule out another flurry, but certainly no big deal. Now, yesterday, Dan, so that would be Thursday, I said to my wife, I was looking at the computer models on my new iPad, and I said to my wife, all of a sudden, she works at a school system, by the way, so she's very concerned about when there might be a delay or a cancellation. She likes that. The teachers pretend that they don't like to have no school, but they like it more than the kids, actually. But yesterday, it looked like there would be some kind of a clipper intensifying under us, and it had like 3 or 4 inches of snow on Monday morning. Well, this morning, that forecast vanished. But I want to put it in the back of your head that it was there yesterday. It certainly may reappear. Remember what I told you that my colleague, who I respect very much, who works at AccuWeather, a man named Bernie Rayno, we coined a phrase called the windshield wiper effect that a lot of the TV meteorologists use every 6 hours when the new data comes in. You know the windshield wiper effect. The storm's going to miss. Yep. The storm's going to hit. The storm's going to miss. The storm's going to hit. Well, we could be seeing a windshield wiper effect because of these models. So I am not dismissing it yet. I'm not forecasting it yet, but I'm just saying keep your eye on Monday morning. It's not a clear-cut miss. Anyway, the consensus of the data is that low pressure will be off Cape Cod on Monday morning and departing. Now, whether or not it gives us any snow, I'm not sure of that yet. By Tuesday, high pressure is strung out from New England down to Mississippi and Alabama. We've got a vigorous storm around Lake Michigan on Wednesday morning. Now, by Thursday morning, the current consensus of computer modeling puts that low up in New Hampshire, from Lake Michigan to New Hampshire. So if you take that track, that's north of us. So what would that do? That would ultimately bring in some mild air. So if that does indeed happen, we would get maybe a little mix at the beginning of ice pellets and freezing rain and snow, but it would ultimately turn to rain as milder air works in. And that's for next Thursday. So that completes our On the Weather Map segment, Dan, because we'll certainly be back to you with another podcast prior to then.
Sure. Okay, now I know that you like to look at the various models, and you've been really eyeing the European model as far as possible snow events. What have you come up with?
Well, Dan, over my career, which, now spans, gosh, I'm adding it up in my head. It's a lot. Uh, 47 years I've been a professional meteorologist since I graduated in May of 1978. So we're working our way toward 5 full decades of being a meteorologist. But the computer model that I tend to like the best is the European model. And so I tend to skew to the European model. And I'm not saying it's right every single time. It's not. And we use the ball player analogies all the time. Yastrzemski was my favorite player. Didn't mean he hit a home run every time. Sometimes he would strike out, but you look at him over the course of his career, darn good player. To me, I look at the European model over the course of my tenure as a meteorologist. I prefer it. So for late tonight and tomorrow morning, so in other words, Saturday, December 5th, the European, December 6th, I'm sorry, today is December 5th, Saturday, December 6th, patchy snow with up to a half an inch of a coating. So if you wake up tomorrow morning and you've got the little gentle snow globe snow coming down and it's pretty and all that, it's not going to pile up. It's going to be maybe a half an inch at most. But that is that patchy snow on the north side of that low, which is right now near Wilmington, North Carolina, going out to sea. Now, the European model does not have that Monday snow. It was the GFS model, the American model, yesterday that had it. Today, it doesn't have it. So I will be looking at the models later today and tomorrow, Saturday, December 6th. And we're not going to come on with a podcast, but remember that you can always go to bradfieldweather.com daily and get the forecast. When I wake up in the morning, first thing I do, Dan, is make a pot of coffee. Put the dog out. then make a pot. Then make the pot of coffee. And while I'm drinking said coffee, I make the forecast. Then I email it to you. Then you put it on bradfieldweather.com along with any little map or historical thing that you happen to find. And we do that every single day. So if you want the latest on this, tomorrow morning, go to bradfieldweather.com and we'll let you know about Monday, if anything's coming in or not, in terms of accumulation. But back to the European now, Dan. Next Friday night, so that would be a week hence, that would be December 12th, going into Saturday morning, December 13th. The European, 2 to 4 inches across the state of Connecticut. And so if you look at the Euro snow totals for the next 14 days, so that takes us from today, December 5th, through Friday, December 19th. So in other words, uh, 6 days prior to Christmas. We have 2 week snow totals of Hartford, 4.7 inches, Waterbury, 4.0 inches, Norwich, 4.2 inches, and even along the shoreline, Bridgeport, 3.0 inches. So the European model is bringing in more snow. So if we add in the current 2.4 we've already had at Bradley, and we add it to the 4.7, sitting a week before Christmas, Bradley could have 7 or 8 inches of snow already um, in the record book, a good week prior to Christmas. And I will tell you, Dan, it so depends on the pattern that you land in. I will always remember the winter of 1995 and 1996. That was the year that Bradley, I'm not talking about the hill towns, I'm talking about in the valley, Bradley, 10 feet of snow that winter. And Dan, the first accumulation of snow did not occur until Christmas Eve, December 24th that year. But we got in a pattern that it was storm after storm after storm coming at us. And I remember the snow piles were so high, plowed up by the plows and everything, that when you came to an intersection, you had to creep out 6 inches because you couldn't see if a car was coming. There was so much snow there. Now, I'm not trying to say that that's going to happen, but we're in a situation that I think is very volatile. So that's it with the snow totals by the European. Now let me give you some temperatures, Dan. Europeans highs, predicting a high of 26 today, a much better 38 tomorrow. But remember, it should be 43, 44 tomorrow. So it's still cold. Sunday, 35. Monday, back to 23. That's the high. Tuesday, 27. Wednesday, 37. Thursday, 35. Friday, 24. And here comes that snow predicted by the European. So, even on, quote, warm days coming up in the next week, and it looks like tomorrow would be the warmest of the next 7 or 8 days, being at 38, we are still 5 to 6 degrees below the normal high temperature. So you see where I'm going with this. By next Friday, we're already out at December 12th, and we have not had a hint of an even average day. So the first 12 days of January are below average temperatures every single day.
Wow. Well, on that note, as we put a wrap on our podcast, and again, this is being put together on Friday, December 5th, what does the immediate forecast look like?
Well, Dan, I'm calling it up on my my aforementioned iPad. Dan, it's going to be a beautiful day today. It's going to be a sunny day, but temperatures only in the mid 20s. The saving grace about today's weather is there's not going to be much in the way of wind. So even though it's cold, it's not going to feel incredibly harsh. Now, tonight, what's going to save the bottom from falling out is the clouds from that storm going out to sea are going to come in. So I'm looking for increasing and thickening clouds, lows between 16 and 22. And I would say some flurries could break out across the state as we head toward daybreak. Now, tomorrow, flurries around primarily in the morning, mostly cloudy during the afternoon. High temperatures moving up through the 30s. Partly cloudy, partial clearing tomorrow night, low again between 16 and 22 degrees. That's midwinter cold on average. Sunday, partly sunny, temperature in the mid 30s. Monday, I'm going to give you a cagey one here, Dan. I'm going to say variably cloudy. And you know when meteorologists say that? They say it when they don't know what the hell is going on. And being honest with you, I'm just got in the back of my mind the GFS predicting that clipper system for Monday morning. So right now, we're not going to go for any snow on Monday morning, but I will say, please look at bradfieldweather.com over the weekend and we'll have any updates for you. All right. And then Tuesday looks partly sunny. Temperatures in the upper 20s, low 30s for the high. Now, Wednesday, remember I told you about that storm at Lake Superior cutting across to New Hampshire. That could bring in some predominantly showers, not a big deal at all. That could start as some sleet and some snow, go over to a little bit of rain, temperature moving up into the upper 30s to maybe close to 40, but I doubt it. Then after that goes by, the cold air floods in again. Remember, the European had a high of 24 for next Friday. So next Friday, very cold, setting the stage, perhaps, for what the European model is showing coming in Friday night and Saturday next week, another 2 to maybe 4 inches of snow. So we will, of course, have another podcast prior to that. But, and I will leave you with this. I am a member of NASJA, and you might say, what the heck is NASJA? Well, it's North American Snow Journalists Association. And all of the northern New England ski areas, the Vermont Ski Area Association, Ski New Hampshire, everybody's part of NASJA. And I have all sorts of contacts. And as we go through the winter, Dan, maybe we'll bring some of them onto the podcast. But Killington, for example, reported this morning that I got an email from them saying, don't forget to tell your listeners and viewers of your podcast that we had 20 inches of snow this week. Killington, Dan. Remember my old colleague Tyler Jankowski?
Right.
He's up in Burlington now, and they report the snow at the stake at Mount Mansfield. The snow depth has been higher this winter than anything that they've had on record at the snow stake already. And I had a report this morning, one of my personal favorite places to go, Dan. Have you and Susan ever gone up to Mount Washington Hotel?
Never been to Mount Washington Hotel, no.
Yeah, I mean, have you ever been up in the Mount Washington Valley? It's just beautiful up there. There's a
No
ski
question. We've
resort
been
called
there. Yeah.
There's a ski resort right there called Bretton Woods,
Yeah.
and nearby called Wildcat Mountain. Well, Kathy sent me some video of skiing, and I was watching the skier, and I was looking at the vistas, and they say from the top of the mountain that those are the views that only an alpine skier can know. And I'll tell you, some of these views are just incredible. You know, meteorologists often say overcast today instead of mostly cloudy, they'll say overcast. Well, do you know that when you're an alpine skier, you can go right up through the clouds, come out on the other side of the clouds, and see an undercast?
Right.
You are up above the clouds, And these are the views that only an alpine skier knows. And I looked at it, and Kathy reported to me that they had 7 to 10 inches of snow from this storm of Tuesday at Wildcat, and they are operating under total midwinter conditions. I mean, they're not even fudging it at all.
Right.
They're just saying midwinter conditions. So I mean, we're off to a rocking and rolling start for at least meteorological winter 2025, 2026.
Wow. Well, on that note, of course, we'll have the update next week, let everybody know what is happening. But Brad, to you and Sandy and our audience, have a great weekend, and we will talk again next week, my friend.
And to you and Susan, Dan, and I wanted to thank Kevin Blake for coming on board as being one of our underwriters again this year. Kevin's returning for I don't know how many years, and same deal with McAllen Construction. I think they've been with us from the beginning. So very, very thankful to our underwriters.
Absolutely. And on that note, the Bradfield Weather Podcast has been underwritten by McAllen Construction. McAllen Construction from the first dig to the last nail, and by Action Carpet and Floor Covering of Simsbury, a family run business that's built for you.